Knowing the name of your succulent is a really important part of learning how to keep it alive and healthy. While succulents as a whole have general care needs, like using the soak and dry method to water and putting them in a pot with a drainage hole using a well-draining soil, each individual species and genus of succulents have different care needs. Some of them prefer growing in full sun. Some of them prefer shade or at least lower light. Some succulents can tolerate really cold temperatures, even snow in the winter. Others will die if they get hit with a small frost. Knowing the name of your succulent will allow you to figure out these individual needs for your plant and allow you to accommodate for them. The tricky part then becomes figuring out what succulent you own. If you're a collector, you might want to know exactly what your plant is down to the genus, species, cultivar, variety. For the most part, however, with succulent care, it's helpful to know at least the genus, and if you can get close to the species or cultivar, that's usually going to be enough to help you keep the plant alive and know the individual needs for it. This came up recently in our Succulent Lovers Club, and I want to show you my process for identifying succulents. I like to start with an image, and I go through a few different steps to figure out what plant I'm actually looking at. There's a lot of apps out there that can help you better identify your succulents. While they can help get you in the right direction, I have found that most apps fall short when it comes to identifying succulents. A big reason for this is there's a lot of different cultivars and succulents that look really similar to each other. As I mentioned in the beginning, you don't necessarily need to know the exact cultivar of succulent you have, but being able to determine what genus the succulent is will make a huge difference. I will usually use identification apps as a starting point, but then I'll go back and do some searching for the name that they've given me to make sure it actually matches my plant. This image was submitted by one of our Succulent Lovers Club members, and I'm going to walk you through my process for identifying this plant. Make sure you start with a really clear, well-lit image of your succulent. Of course, if you have the succulent in your possession, you can compare it to what you're seeing on screen. But if you're using any sort of app or program to help you identify the succulent, the better the picture, the more likely it is you're going to get a better result from the app. I like to start by using Google Lens, or if I'm on a computer, using Google Images. So from here, you can actually just upload an image. I'm going to drag mine here onto the screen, and it will start searching for matches for your plant. Now, this is where things start to get tricky and why I say that you can't always trust the first result that you get from an identification program. Here, we have a picture of an aeonium, which does have some similarities, but after 12 years of growing succulents, I can tell right off the bat that this is not an aeonium. It's likely an Echeveria or a similar hybrid. So you can see also it is showing up some other Echeverias. And the first one that came to mind for me was Echeveria Lola. That said, I can tell there's some differences here from Lola to this plant. So I don't know that it's a perfect match for Echeveria Lola, but it is very similar. So once I have a plant that looks similar and I want to verify, I'm going to go ahead and do a search for that plant name. So in this case, I'm going to do Echeveria Lola, and I'm going to go to the images. So here you'll see a bunch of images, and again, you have to be careful because not all of these will be pictures of Lola, especially if there's like advertising. Just make sure you're paying attention to the descriptions below. So you can see a lot of different pictures here of what Echeveria Lola might look like. Now, if your plant is stretched out or it hasn't gotten enough light, it makes it really difficult to identify the plant because the colors won't match some of the classic images of the plant. So in this case, Echeveria Lola typically has a kind of purple hue to it. This one is a lot more green, but what I'm looking at for identifying features are the way that the leaves come to a point at the end. I'm also looking at the width of the leaf. I'm noticing, does it come down into a sharp point at the bottom, or does the leaf stay wide the whole time? What colors are in the leaves? Are the tips of the leaves a different color? So you can see here this has pink tips, but then the rest of the leaf is kind of a blue-green. It doesn't quite match with Echeveria Lola, which has more purple leaves And Lola also does not have that pink tip at the end. So the next place that I would go is, I feel like it matches Echeveria's. And so I'm going to open up Mountain Crest Gardens because they have a lot of great pictures of succulents. And I'm actually going to type in Echeveria here. And the reason why I'm going to type it in instead of just going to their Echeveria section is it will also show you succulents that are out of stock. Whereas if you go to, if I come down here and I go to Echeveria, let's just open this in a new tab real quick. You can see there's 109 products here. Whereas on my search, I have 333. So granted, that means there's a lot more for me to scroll through, but that's also more that I can kind of match up with. Now, spoiler alert, I am not 100% sure on the ID of this plant, and that's exactly why I wanted to show this particular plant to you. I want to point out that if you just figured out that this was an Echeveria, that's likely going to be enough information for you to learn how to care for it. You'll start to learn that Echeveria are very prone to rot, so you really want to make sure that your soil is drying out quickly. You want to let them go for long periods of time without water. And then you'll also learn that Echeveria have a farina on them, or this white powdery coating that protects them from sunburn, and it also helps the water roll off the leaves. If you touch this with your finger, the farina will wipe off and your plant is a little bit more susceptible to sunburn. As you can see over on the left here, there's a lot of different varieties of Echeveria, and they can look extremely different. This is actually a new one to me, Calibra. It looks totally funky and not at all like these others around it. So there are some identifying characteristics of different genre of succulents, and that's ultimately what you want to start to learn. Echeveria tend to have wide, fleshy leaves. They usually come to a point. They have that farina I was talking about, but there's obviously going to be variations within the genus. So in this case, the ones that I have found tend to match up best for this plant are Echeveria Lola, though again, the color isn't quite right. Ghost Echeveria or Echeveria lilacina is also a good fit. You can see it has these really sharp points at the end. They look sharp, they're not actually sharp. And Fleur Blanc is probably the one that matches the best here, where it has kind of the blue-green leaves and the pink point at the end. So if I had this succulent and I was going to label it and, put it into the succulent tracker app or just keep a record of it, I would say it's probably a close match to Fleur Blanc. Again, there are going to be a lot of other varieties, and there's constantly new hybrids coming out that look very similar to succulents that are already available on the market. So Echeveria specifically tend to be a little bit tricky to identify all the way down to the cultivar because there are so many hybrids and the differences between them are extremely subtle. Having said that, if you know the flower color of your Echeveria, that will help narrow it down as well. But this is the process that I go through. I like to use an identification app or, like I said, Google Lens, Google Images as a starting point, and then do some searching either from, your favorite place to search online, or I like going to Mountain Crest Gardens and just trying to match up images that I see here to the picture of my plant or the actual plant in my hand. Once you know that, then you can dive in and start learning more about how to care for your succulents. So on the Succulents and Sunshine website, we highlight a bunch of different genre of succulents. And then within these, you can also get information on specific plants. So you can see with all these crassulas, there's a bunch of different varieties. They all look a little bit different, but you can click into one of them and get details about how much sun it likes, how much water it needs compared to other succulents, the size, the temperatures that it's rated for, as well as how to propagate it. There's a lot of other information here as well. This is a really great process to go through just to help build your skills in succulent identification. If you want more help identifying your succulents or figuring out what's wrong with some of your plants, I would love to invite you to join the Succulent Lovers Club. Every month in the club, we have 2 Q&A calls where you can come on and ask questions in real time. You can show us what you're doing with your succulents, and we can give you input and advice. There's also a great community area where you can post photos. I will personally be in there and help you identify your succulents. A lot of our club members are great at identifying succulents as well. And then each month we have a new workshop where we talk about something specific about succulent care. Right now on our Q&A calls, we're also having a little identification section where we're highlighting a specific genus of succulent and the identifying characteristics of that genus to help you build those skills to better be able to identify succulents on your own from just a quick glance without having to use an app or doing a bunch of searching. If nothing else, if you just want to get better at identifying succulents, I highly recommend spending some time going through and looking at different varieties within each genus of succulent. Pay attention to the little nuances of what the leaves look like, where the color is placed, how the leaves are shaped, and what color the flowers are, and that will help you better develop those identification skills.